The first thing I noticed was that she would not look at me, not because she was guilty, because she was scared. 14 years old, sitting in my courtroom with a traffic ticket folded between her fingers like it was a criminal charge. Her hands were shaking so badly that the paper kept making that tiny crackling sound you only hear when a child is trying very hard not to cry, and across from her sat the man who had written the ticket, calm, clean uniform, perfect posture, not nervous for a second. That is when my instincts began to wake up, because after decades on the bench, I have learned one thing. The loudest truth in a courtroom is not always spoken. Sometimes it sits in silence. Sometimes it hides in a child's lowered eyes. Sometimes it stands in a grown man's confidence when he should be explaining himself. The ticket said the girl had been waiting illegally. That was the phrase written in black ink, waiting, not speeding, not stealing, not attacking anyone waiting, and somehow that one word would open the door to one of the most disturbing cases I had seen that month. Her name was Emily Carter, 14 years old, thin shoulders, oversized hoodie, hair pulled back like she had done it in a hurry. She came to court with her mother, who looked exhausted in a way that told me life had already taken too much from her. Emily had received a ticket outside a small grocery store on a Tuesday evening. According to the officer's report, she had been standing near the curb for nearly 40 minutes, refusing to move when asked. At first glance, it sounded simple, a minor violation, a stubborn teenager, a small fine. But courtrooms are dangerous places for simple assumptions, because when I asked Emily why she was waiting there, she opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her mother whispered, "Tell her, baby." Emily's eyes filled with tears, and the officer immediately leaned forward and said, "Your Honor, she was warned multiple times." That was the first mistake, not legally, psychologically. People who are telling the full truth usually let the facts breathe. Manipulators try to control the room before the truth has room to stand. I looked at him and said, "Officer, I did not ask you." The courtroom went quiet. Emily finally spoke. She said, "I was waiting for my little brother." That sentence changed the temperature in the room. I asked, "Where was your brother?" She swallowed hard. "He was supposed to come out of the store, but he didn't." Her mother lowered her head. The officer's jaw tightened. Now I was listening differently. Emily explained that every Tuesday her mother worked late, and Emily was responsible for picking up her 8-year-old brother Noah from an after-school program next to the grocery store. That day, Noah was late. Emily waited. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 30. She had no phone. Her mother's phone had been disconnected for non-payment. So Emily stood by the curb, watching the door, terrified that if she walked away, her brother would come out and not find her. That is not loitering. That is responsibility. That is a child carrying an adult's burden. But then the officer approached her. According to Emily, he asked why she was standing there. She told him. He told her to leave. She said she couldn't. He told her again. She refused because she was afraid her brother would be left alone. Then came the ticket. A 14-year-old girl got punished for waiting for her missing little brother. But I still did not have the whole story, because something about the officer's face told me he was not uncomfortable about the ticket. He was uncomfortable about what might come after it. I asked him, "Did you check whether the brother was inside?" He said, "That was not my responsibility." A few people in the gallery whispered. I leaned forward. A child tells you her 8-year-old brother is missing, and your response is to write her a ticket. He said, "She was obstructing the sidewalk." That answer was too polished, too cold, too practiced. And in my courtroom, cold answers around frightened children make me look deeper. So I asked the mother when Noah finally appeared. She said he did not come out of the grocery store. He came from behind it. That was when Emily broke down. Not a small cry, a silent collapse. Her shoulders folded inward. Her face disappeared into her hands. The entire courtroom felt it. I have watched hardened criminals fake tears. I have watched adults perform grief like theater, but a child's fear has a different weight. It does not ask to be believed. It simply leaks out Noah had been found behind the store nearly an hour later, crying near the dumpsters. He said a man had told him his sister had left. A man in a uniform. The courtroom froze. The officer did not move. Not even a blink. That stillness told me more than anger would have. I asked Emily, "Did you see that man?" She nodded. Then, slowly, with her finger trembling, she pointed across the courtroom at the officer. A sound moved through the room like wind before a storm. The officer immediately said, "That is false," but he said it too fast. Before I asked the next question, before I allowed the accusation to fully exist. And that is another thing I have learned. Innocent people deny accusations. Guilty people try to kill them before they grow legs. I ordered the store's security footage to be brought in. The officer's attorney objected, claiming this was only a minor ticket hearing. I looked at him and said, it stopped being minor the moment an 8-year-old child ended up behind a grocery store crying because someone allegedly lied to him. That was when the officer's calm began to crack, only slightly. A twitch in the cheek, a shift in the chair, a hand closing into a fist, then opening again, small things. But in court, small things are often the truth trying to escape the body. While we waited for the footage, I asked Emily what happened after the ticket. She said the officer told her, "Kids like you need to learn consequences." That sentence sat heavy in the room. Kids like you, not children, not young people, kids like you. There was judgment in those words, maybe about poverty, maybe about race, maybe about class, maybe about the fact that Emily's shoes were worn, her mother looked tired, and nobody powerful had walked into that store to protect them. I have seen that kind of arrogance before. It wears authority like armor. It does not always break the law loudly. Sometimes it bends the rules quietly against people who cannot fight back. Emily's mother then told me something else. This was not the first time the officer had stopped Emily. 3 weeks earlier, he had accused her of skipping school while she was walking home with groceries. A week after that, he questioned her outside the same store and asked why she was always hanging around. Always. That word bothered me. Because children with stable homes wait. Children from struggling homes hang around. The action can be the same. The label changes depending on who is watching. The officer denied targeting her. He said the neighborhood had complaints about juveniles. I asked for written complaints. He had none. I asked for body camera footage. He said it was not activated. Another silence, not activated. I have heard that phrase many times, and it always arrives at the most convenient moment. Then the clerk brought in the security footage. The screen was turned toward the courtroom. Emily covered her mouth. Her mother grabbed her hand. The officer stared straight ahead. The video began with Emily standing near the curb, exactly where she said she had been. She was not blocking anyone. She was not bothering customers. He was just watching the door. Then the officer appeared. He spoke to her. No audio, but his body language was clear. Pointing, commanding, stepping closer. Emily shook her head and pointed toward the store. Then the officer wrote something, the ticket, but that was not the part that changed everything. The clerk fast-forwarded. A few minutes later, the footage showed little Noah coming out of a side entrance, small backpack, looking around, confused. Then the officer walked toward him. The courtroom became so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. The officer bent down and spoke to Noah. Noah looked toward the curb. Emily was still there. But then the officer pointed away from her, toward the back of the building. Noah hesitated. The officer pointed again, and the child walked in that direction. Emily never saw him. Her little brother was sent away while she stood waiting for him only feet away. I looked at the officer. For the first time, his face had color in it, not anger, fear, but the footage did not stop there. Because seconds after Noah disappeared behind the store, another man entered the frame, a man I had not noticed at first. He was standing near a dark vehicle, watching, waiting. And when Noah walked toward the back of the building, that man stepped forward. Emily's mother gasped. Emily whispered, "That's him. I paused the video. The entire courtroom leaned toward the screen. And in that frozen frame, the ticket in Emily's hand was no longer a ticket. It was the first thread in something much darker. The moment I froze that security footage, I knew this was no longer about a ticket. It was no longer about a 14-year-old girl standing near a curb. It was no longer about waiting illegally. What I was looking at on that screen was a doorway into something much darker, something that had almost happened in plain sight while everyone else walked past. The courtroom had gone silent in a way I rarely hear. Not normal silence, not respectful silence. This was the kind of silence that comes when every person in the room realizes they may have just watched a child come within seconds of disappearing forever. Emily's mother had one hand over her mouth. Her other hand was gripping Emily's shoulder so tightly that I could see her knuckles whitening. Emily was staring at the screen with wide eyes, not blinking, not breathing properly, like she was watching the worst moment of her life finally become visible to everyone else. And the officer? He sat perfectly still, too still. That kind of stillness is not calm. It is calculation. I have seen guilty men shout. I have seen guilty men cry. I have seen guilty men collapse under pressure. But the most dangerous ones often do nothing at first. They sit there, measuring the room, waiting to see how much the court actually knows. So I asked him again, "Officer, who is the man standing near that vehicle?" He said, "I don't know." But he said it without looking at the screen. That mattered. An innocent man looks at the evidence because he is trying to understand it. A guilty man avoids it because he already understands it too well. I told the clerk to play the footage again, slower this time. The video rolled back. There was Emily standing near the front curb, small, nervous, waiting. She kept looking toward the store entrance, then toward the side door, then back again. Nothing about her body language suggested trouble. She was not laughing with friends. She was not blocking customers. She was not causing a disturbance. She was simply waiting. Then the officer entered the frame. He walked with authority, but there was something sharp in the way he approached her. His finger pointed at the sidewalk, then at the street, then away from the building. Emily shook her head and pointed toward the grocery store. That gesture broke my heart, because even without audio, any parent, any teacher, any decent adult could understand what she was saying. My brother is inside. I cannot leave. But the officer did not look toward the store. He did not check the entrance. He did not ask an employee. He did not call anyone. He pulled out his ticket book. And in that moment, the entire power of the system came down on a child who had no phone, no money, no adult beside her, and no way to defend herself except the truth. The footage moved forward. Noah came out from the side entrance. Small backpack, blue jacket, one shoe untied. He looked left. He looked right. He was searching for his sister. Emily was still near the curb. She was close enough that if he had taken just a few steps forward, he would have seen her. But before he could, the officer walked toward him. The courtroom leaned forward. The officer bent down and spoke to Noah. No audio, just movement. Noah pointed toward the front of the store. The officer shook his head. Then he pointed behind the building. Noah hesitated. That hesitation stayed with me. Children know fear before they understand danger. Their bodies sense something before their minds can explain it. Noah did not want to go behind that store. You could see it in his feet, in the way he paused, in the way his shoulders rose. But when a man in uniform tells an 8-year-old where to go, a child obeys. That is what made this so sickening. Authority was used against innocence. Noah walked toward the back. And then the man near the dark vehicle moved, not randomly, not casually. He moved like he had been waiting for a signal. I ordered the rear camera footage to be shown. The store manager, pale and shaking, handed over another file. The rear angle appeared on the screen. It showed the alley behind the grocery store, the dumpsters, the loading area, the parked vehicle, and that same man. Noah entered the frame. The man smiled. That smile made my stomach turn. It was not a friendly smile. It was not the natural warmth of an adult helping a lost child. It was controlled, practiced, patient. He stepped toward Noah. Noah stepped back. The man bent down and said something. Then he reached toward the boy's backpack strap. Emily gasped. Her mother cried out, "Oh my God." And then, by the grace of God, a delivery driver came around the corner pushing a cart of crates. The man immediately pulled his hand back. He turned away. He pretended to check his phone. Noah ran toward the wall and started crying. That delivery driver did not know it in that moment, but he had interrupted something horrifying. The officer's attorney stood up quickly and tried to speak, but I raised my hand. No. Sit down. Because there are moments in a courtroom where procedure cannot be allowed to suffocate truth. I asked the store manager if he recognized the man. He nodded slowly. His voice was barely above a whisper. His name is Darren Mills. He does repair jobs around here sometimes. Then I asked the question that made the officer finally move. "Do you know Darren Mills?" The officer said. "I may have seen him around." May have. That phrase is one of the oldest hiding places in the English language. Not yes, not no. Just enough fog to avoid a direct lie, but the truth had already started walking toward him. The prosecutor requested phone records connected to the incident, and when the preliminary records came in, the courtroom changed again. 3 calls, 3 separate calls between the officer and Darren Mills on the same day. 1 call before Emily was ticketed. 1 call minutes before Noah exited the store. 1 call after Noah was found behind the building crying. I watched the officer's face as those records were read aloud. His eyes dropped. Only for half a second, but I saw it. A courtroom teaches you to notice what people try to hide between moments. The truth often does not arrive as a confession. It arrives as a blink, a swallow, a breath held too long. Emily's mother stood up, shaking. "You knew? You knew my son was back there?" The bailiff moved closer, but I let her words hang in the room, because sometimes a mother's pain says what the law cannot fully capture. The officer finally spoke. He said, "I didn't know anything was going to happen." There it was. Not I didn't know him, not I didn't send the child there, not I had no involvement. He said he did not know anything was going to happen. The courtroom heard it. Emily heard it. Her mother heard it. And I heard the door of his own defense begin to close. I leaned forward and asked, "Then what exactly did you think was going to happen?" He had no answer. That silence was not empty. It was filled with guilt. The investigation that followed revealed more than anyone expected. Darren Mills had been seen near the after-school program multiple times. Parents had complained about a man watching children near the grocery store, but those complaints had been dismissed as vague. 1 report had even been routed through the same officer, and somehow nothing had been done. That is how predators survive, not always because nobody sees them, sometimes because the wrong people choose not to see them. Emily had been labeled a problem because she was poor, young, and easy to ignore. Noah had been treated like a child no one important was watching. And the officer had believed that a ticket would make Emily look guilty, that nobody would question him. That was his mistake. He underestimated the girl, and he underestimated the courtroom. I dismissed the ticket immediately, but I made it clear that dismissal was only the beginning. I referred the officer for criminal investigation, official misconduct, child endangerment, obstruction, and possible conspiracy. Darren Mills was taken into custody after investigators connected him to prior suspicious incidents near that same route. Emily sat there crying quietly, not because she had won, because she was finally believed. That is a kind of justice people do not talk about enough. Before punishment comes recognition, before verdict comes listening, before the law can protect someone, it must first admit that their fear was real. I asked Emily to stand. She rose slowly, wiping her face with her sleeve. I told her, "You were not wrong for waiting. You were not wrong for refusing to leave. You protected your brother when the adults around you failed. Paid him." Her lips trembled. Then Noah, who had been sitting beside his mother, reached for her hand. That small gesture broke the courtroom more than any argument could have, because at the center of all of this was not a headline, not a viral moment, not a legal file. It was a sister who stayed, a brother who trusted, a mother who almost lost everything, and a uniform that had been used like a weapon. The officer was removed from the courtroom in custody later that day. He did not look at Emily. He did not look at Noah. Men like that rarely look at the people they hurt when the mask finally comes off. Darren Mills was charged after further evidence showed messages, location patterns, and prior attempts to approach children. The delivery driver became a key witness. The store manager turned over every second of footage, and Emily's so-called minor ticket became the thread that pulled the whole truth into the light. I have sentenced thieves. I have confronted liars. I have watched families break apart on the witness stand. But that case stayed with me because it reminded me of something every judge must never forget. The smallest case on the docket may carry the biggest truth: a parking ticket, a sidewalk violation, a child accused of waiting. On paper, it looked like nothing. In reality, it was almost the beginning of a tragedy. When Emily left my courtroom, she held her brother's hand tightly. Her mother walked behind them, crying silently, one hand on each child's shoulder. And I remember thinking that justice does not always roar. Sometimes justice is a judge looking at a frightened child and saying, "I believe you." Sometimes justice is a ticket being torn apart because the system finally sees the human being behind the paper. And sometimes justice begins because a 14-year-old girl refused to leave her brother behind, even when a man with authority told to walk away. That day taught everyone in my courtroom one unforgettable lesson. Evil does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it speaks calmly. Sometimes it writes a ticket, but truth also does not always look powerful. Sometimes truth is a scared little girl standing on a sidewalk, waiting, shaking, refusing to move. And in the end, that little girl was stronger than every lie told against her.